The kitchen in Agnes Hawthorne's house was thick with the smell of cold grease and boiled roots, the kind of air that clung to skin long after you left the room. The girls crowded around the rough table, elbows touching, voices low and eager. "Dawson Ranch," one of them said, rolling the name on her tongue. "They say the man there works you like an animal. He fires people for breathing wrong." Another added, "Mean as a winter snake." Laughter rippled through the room. One of Agnes's daughters leaned back in her chair and turned her eyes toward the corner. "Well," she said lightly, "if that place needs beasts of burden, we've got the perfect one right here." Rebecca Hollis sat on a low stool near the hearth. Her broad shoulders curved inward, her hands folded tight in her lap. She did not look up. "She's built for it," the girl went on, smiling. "Strong back, thick legs. I'll tell Mother to send her to Dawson. Let her earn her keep properly." The laughter grew louder. Rebecca stayed silent, already knowing what silence always meant. Kentucky lay rough and unfinished at the edge of the young nation, a land still arguing with itself about what it would become. Forests pressed close to the roads. Towns rose and fell on rumor and harvest, and a person's worth was measured less by kindness than by usefulness. For women without husbands, usefulness was often the only protection they had. Rebecca Hollis had learned that early. She was a large woman, heavy through the hips and shoulders, her body built solid rather than soft, as if it had been shaped for endurance instead of beauty. Her hands were wide and scarred from work she never spoke of. When she walked, she did so carefully, as though the ground might object to her weight. Her eyes, a muted gray, rarely met anyone else's for long. They slipped away out of habit, trained by years of knowing what people saw when they looked at her. When fear took hold, her words tangled, sounds caught in her throat, broken and unfinished, betraying her before she could stop them. Rebecca had learned to speak little, and when she did, to choose silence over the risk of being mocked. Silence, at least, did not stutter. She had not always lived in Agnes Hawthorne's house. Once, Rebecca had belonged to her parents' home, small and worn but held together by routine and necessity. They were poor, like nearly everyone around them, but they believed in the one promise frontier life still offered a daughter like Rebecca: marriage. A husband meant security. A husband meant purpose. A husband meant forgiveness for being born the way she was. The match had been arranged carefully. A widower's son from a neighboring county, a respectable family. No talk of love, only suitability. On the day the two families met, Rebecca had worn her best dress, altered and let out until there was no more cloth to give. She remembered standing in the doorway while the men talked, her mother's hands shaking as she smoothed her apron again and again. The young man had looked at Rebecca once, just once. Then his mouth had twisted. He said he would not marry her, not like that, not someone so big, so awkward, so broken in her speech. He accused her parents of deceiving him, of trying to pass off a burden as a bride. His words had landed harder when he turned his contempt on them, calling them desperate and dishonest before both families. Rebecca remembered the silence that followed. Not defense, not anger, just shame. Her parents did not strike her. They did not curse her. They did not even raise their voices. They simply looked away, as though the sight of her had become too painful to bear. In that moment, Rebecca understood something that would stay with her for years. She was not only unwanted, she was the cause. That night, she packed what little she owned. She left before dawn, believing that if she removed herself, the wound she had caused might heal. Guilt walked beside her every mile. Her mother's last act was a letter, pressed into Rebecca's hands with trembling fingers. It was addressed to Agnes Hawthorne, a distant relative in another town. The words were careful and pleading, written by someone who had already lost the right to ask for much. Please take her in. Please help her find work. Please be patient with her. Agnes Hawthorne read the letter once and decided Rebecca's worth in the same breath. Agnes had 4 daughters of her own and several other girls under her roof, girls with nowhere else to go, girls who paid for their beds with coin and labor. Agnes offered shelter the way a lender offered money, never for free, and never without keeping count. From the beginning, Rebecca was different, larger, slower to speak, harder to ignore. Agnes accepted her because of the letter, but she made it clear that charity had limits. Rebecca would work. She would earn her meals. She would not be indulged. The other girls learned quickly that Rebecca was an easy target. She could carry more. She complained less. When mocked, she shrank instead of striking back. They sent her to the hardest jobs, the heaviest loads, the longest days. Agnes did not stop them. Rebecca told herself this was fair. She told herself that effort might make up for the rest, that if she worked hard enough, quietly enough, her presence might be tolerated. By the time Dawson Ranch was mentioned in the kitchen, Rebecca already understood what being sent there meant. It meant she had been weighed again and found useful. Rebecca did not sleep that night. She lay on her narrow pallet beneath Agnes Hawthorne's roof, staring into the dark while the house breathed around her. Every creak of timber sounded like a whisper. Every shadow felt crowded with voices she could not shut out. The girls' laughter from the kitchen replayed itself over and over in her mind. Beast of burden, built for it. Dawson will break her. The words pressed down on her chest until breathing felt like work. She thought of the rumors they had traded so eagerly. Robert Dawson's temper, his hard hand, the way people said he drove workers off like animals that disappointed him. She imagined his eyes turning on her, measuring her body the way everyone else did, seeing only bulk and clumsiness and fault. She imagined the familiar pattern repeating itself, hope offered briefly, then taken away with mockery. What frightened her most was not the labor. It was people. New faces meant new judgments. New places meant new ways to be wrong. Rebecca had endured hunger and exhaustion, cold floors and aching joints. What she feared was the slow, careful cruelty of being watched, weighed, and dismissed again, of being reminded, in 100 small ways, that her body was an offense before she ever opened her mouth. By dawn, she had given up on sleep. She dressed quietly in the half-light, moving with practiced care. Her pack was already prepared. The few things she owned folded and refolded, as if order might protect them. She paused at the door only once, listening to the steady breathing of the other girls. They slept easily, unburdened by the thought of being sent away like unwanted stock. Rebecca slipped out before anyone could see her leave. The morning air was cool and gray, the road empty. She walked quickly at first, as though the house might call her back, as though laughter might follow her into the fields. Only when the town fell behind her did her pace slow. Each step toward Dawson Ranch felt heavier than the last, her fears growing louder with every mile. The land grew rougher as she went. Trees thinned, fences appeared half-built, then not at all. By the time the ranch came into view, her shoulders ached beneath the weight of her pack, and her stomach was knotted tight with dread. A man was working near the fence line. He stood solid and unmoving against the open land, his hammer rising and falling with deliberate precision. He did not glance up when Rebecca approached. She stopped several paces away, uncertain whether to speak or wait, her heart beating so hard she felt it in her throat. At last, he turned. His eyes swept over her, not with interest, not with amusement, but with the same cold attention one might give to a length of ground that needed clearing. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was plain. So was the tone. Rebecca forced air into her lungs. I was sent," she said. "For work." "Sent by who, Agnes Hawthorne." Something passed through his expression then. Not surprise, recognition. He wiped his hands on his trousers and looked at her again. More carefully this time. His gaze lingering on her hands, her stance, the way she held herself, as though expecting a blow. "You ever worked a farm?" he asked. "Yes." "What kind?" "All kinds." It was the truth, though she had never thought to be proud of it. He studied her a moment longer. "Dawson Ranch isn't easy," he said. "I don't keep people who slow the work." Rebecca swallowed. "I won't." The words came out steadier than she felt. "Name Rebecca Hollis." "Robert Dawson." He gestured toward the barn. "You want work? You start there. Stalls haven't been cleaned right in a week. If you're done before sundown, we'll talk about tomorrow." That was all. No questions about her past, no warning about his temper, no mocking glance at her size. Just work. Rebecca walked past him into the barn. The smell of neglect struck her first manure. Damp hay, rot settling into wood. It was a task designed to drive someone away quietly, without argument. She set down her pack and took up the shovel. Rebecca worked the way she always had, steadily, relentlessly, without complaint. Sweat darkened her dress. Her arms burned, her back screamed. She did not stop. Hunger gnawed at her, and still she kept moving, afraid that if she paused, doubt would catch up to her. Robert passed through the barn once. Then again. He said nothing. He only watched. When the sun dipped low, the stalls were clean. Not acceptable. Clean. Rebecca leaned against a post, lightheaded and shaking, waiting for the familiar dismissal. Robert came in at last. He inspected the work carefully, tested the floor with his boot, checked the corners others ignored. Then he nodded once. "You can sleep in the loft," he said. "Supper's in an hour." For a moment, Rebecca could not move. Thank you," she managed when he turned away. He paused just long enough to say, "Tomorrow's harder," as he left. Rebecca lowered herself to the floor, her legs trembling beneath her, and realized something that frightened her more than all the rest. For the first time, she had not been laughed at. She had not been sent away. She had been allowed to stay. The next morning began before the sun cleared the trees. Rebecca woke in the loft to the smell of dust and old hay, her body stiff and aching in places she did not remember injuring. For a brief, disorienting moment, she expected to hear Agnes Hawthorne's sharp voice calling orders from below, or the rustle of girls rising early just to watch and judge. Instead, there was only the low shifting of animals in their stalls and the distant ring of metal striking wood somewhere outside. She lay still, listening. No one was laughing. When she climbed down the ladder, Robert Dawson was already working near the barn. Sleeves rolled, movements deliberate and efficient. He did not greet her, but he did not ask how she had slept. He handed her a pair of gloves without comment and pointed toward the far fence line. "Post there's loose," he said. "Needs resetting." Rebecca nodded and took the tools. The ground fought every blow, packed hard by seasons of neglect. Sweat ran into her eyes before the post finally stood straight. She did not pause to stretch or rest. When the task was done, she moved on, mending wire, hauling water, clearing brush that crept too close to the barn. Robert watched from a distance. He corrected her only once, adjusting the angle of a brace with a brief motion of his hand. He did not shout. He did not touch her shoulder to guide her. He simply showed her what was wrong and stepped back, as if trusting her to learn. That unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. By the third day, Rebecca noticed something else. He did not set her up to fail. The work was hard, sometimes brutal, but it was fair. Each task had an end. Each end was acknowledged. When she finished early, Robert gave her more to do, not as punishment, but because there was always more land than hands. At midday, a tin cup of water appeared near where she worked. He did not watch to see if she drank it. Rebecca's body remained heavy, her movements still careful, but something in her began to shift. She no longer startled when Robert approached. She learned the rhythm of the place, the hour when the horses grew restless, the sound of weather turning, the boards on the porch that complained underfoot. She also learned Robert Dawson's silences. He spoke only when words were needed, when his temper flared. It was aimed at warped boards or stubborn earth, never at her. Once, when a gate hinge failed and slammed shut, Rebecca flinched, bracing herself for shouting that did not come. Robert set the hinge right and went back to work. That evening, Rebecca sat on the porch step, her hands resting loosely in her lap, the sky stretching wide and empty above the fields. She searched herself for the tight knot of fear she had carried for so long, and found it loosened. If not gone, it was not happiness, it was not safety, it was the absence of dread, days folded into weeks. Rebecca worked through sore muscles and blistered hands, and still she rose each morning. One afternoon, after hauling stones from the creek bed until her arms shook, she stopped, breath coming fast, her vision blurring at the edges. She told herself to keep going. Rest was something you earned only after usefulness had been proven beyond doubt. Robert noticed. He crossed the field and stopped a few paces from her. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said. His voice was calm, almost awkward, as though the words themselves were unfamiliar. "If you need help, say so." Rebecca stared at the ground. No one had ever offered help without demanding something back. Robert reached into the pocket of his coat and held out a small, wrapped parcel. "Take a break," he added. "Eat this." It was a piece of bread and fruit, simple and unremarkable. To Rebecca, it felt dangerously close to kindness. She hesitated, then took it with hands that trembled more than the work had ever made them. Robert did not wait for thanks. He turned away and went back to his own labor, as if the exchange had meant nothing at all. Rebecca sat on a stone at the edge of the field, the food resting in her palms. She did not eat right away. She studied it, half expecting it to be taken back or followed by a reminder of debt. When nothing happened, she took a careful bite. The taste was ordinary. The feeling was not. As she ate, something inside her shifted, slow and unsettling. She realized that she had spent her life believing endurance was the same as strength, that surviving alone, in silence, was proof of worth. Robert Dawson's offer threatened that belief in a way pain never had. If she could ask for help and not be punished, then perhaps she was not as alone as she had taught herself to be. The thought frightened her. But when Robert glanced her way, only briefly, there was no expectation in his eyes, only the steady acknowledgement of someone who had seen her effort and found it enough. Rebecca finished the bread and rose to her feet. She went back to work with a different weight in her chest. Heavier, perhaps, but warmer too. And for the first time, the idea of staying did not feel like something she had to earn every moment. It felt like something she might be allowed to choose. The trouble did not announce itself with shouting. It arrived on wheels, slow and deliberate, the sound of iron rims grinding against packed earth. Long before Rebecca saw the carriage, the noise made her stomach tighten. No one came to Dawson Ranch without reason, and reason had a way of turning sharp once it crossed the gate. Rebecca was sorting tools near the yard when the carriage stopped. Agnes Hawthorne climbed down first, her skirts untouched by dust, her posture rigid with purpose. Behind her followed her 4 daughters, faces arranged in familiar expressions of curiosity and contempt. They looked around the ranch openly, as though measuring its worth, as though deciding how much it deserved to exist. Rebecca felt her chest hollow. Agnes's eyes found her immediately. "So this is where you ran," Agnes said. Her voice carried easily, sharpened by satisfaction. "I might have known." Rebecca did not answer. Her fingers curled around the rake handle until her knuckles ached. One of the daughters laughed softly. "Dawson Ranch," she said, glancing at the sagging fence, the worn boards of the barn. "This is the place everyone's talking about." "Talking how?" another asked, already smiling. Agnes tilted her head. "They say the man here works people until they break, fires them without pay, drives them off like animals." Her gaze slid back to Rebecca's body, I suppose that wouldn't frighten you. You're used to being treated that way. The girls laughed. I heard he can't keep workers. One of them added, no one lasts. Must be desperate to take in something like you. Rebecca's throat closed. She could feel the old pattern tightening around her ribs, the instinct to shrink. To apologize. To make herself smaller than she already felt. She kept her eyes on the dirt, willing the moment to pass. Agnes stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it intimate and cruel. The town's already whispering, a big, foolish girl living alone with an angry man on the edge of nowhere. She shook her head. People will say anything, and none of it will be kind to you. Rebecca flinched despite herself. One of the daughters circled a little closer, inspecting her openly. You look heavier, she said. Guess all that hard work finally suits you. Maybe that's all you were ever good for. Another chimed in. Do you sleep in the barn with the animals, or does he keep you closer than that? The laughter cut deeper than shouting ever could. Rebecca felt heat rise behind her eyes. She told herself not to cry. Crying only proved them right. She tasted metal at the back of her tongue and focused on breathing, on staying upright. Enough. The voice came from behind her. Robert Dawson stepped into the yard, his presence sudden and solid, like a door slammed shut. He did not raise his voice, but the word landed with weight. Agnes turned sharply. So you're the man, she said. Robert Dawson. I expected worse. Robert ignored the insult. His eyes moved over the group, then returned to Rebecca. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not touch her shoulder. He simply stepped closer, placing himself between her and the others without ceremony. You have business here, he asked Agnes. I've come to take back what's mine, Agnes replied, reaching into her bag. The girl owes me. Food, shelter, months of work. She pulled out a folded letter. Her mother sent her to me by this. She doesn't get to decide, she's finished paying. One of the daughters smirked. You really want her here, she said to Robert. The town thinks you've lost your mind. Taking in trash no one else wants. Robert's gaze flicked to the girls then. Sharp as a blade finding its edge. I know you, he said quietly. Their smiles faltered. All four of you came here once. He went on. Asked for work. Said you could handle anything. Agnes stiffened. My daughters. Your daughters, Robert interrupted. Together didn't do half the work Rebecca does before noon. Complained about dirt, about heat, about lifting anything heavier than their pride. Robert finished. Silence spread. Thick and uncomfortable, Agnes flushed. That letter, Robert took it, read it once, then folded it again with care. This doesn't bind her to you, he said. It's a request, not a chain. He looked at Rebecca then, fully, giving her the space to be seen. Do you want to go with her? He asked. The question rang louder than the insults. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. She thought of the nights without sleep, the kitchen laughter, the way she had learned to disappear to survive. She thought of water left where she could reach it, of bread offered without condition, of work that ended in acknowledgement instead of ridicule. She lifted her head. No, she said. The word shook, but it stood. I want to stay. Agnes's face twisted. Ungrateful, she spat. After everything, Robert stepped forward. She's free, he said. And while she works here, she's under my protection. The word protection seemed to still the air. Agnes cursed and turned away, her daughters following, their laughter brittle and forced. The carriage rolled back down the road, carrying the old voices with it. Rebecca stood where she was, shaking, but unbroken. For the first time, the cruelty had come and failed to take her with it. For a long moment, after the carriage disappeared down the road, no one spoke. The dust settled slowly, drifting back across the yard as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The horses shifted, then returned to their feed. Somewhere behind the barn, a loose board creaked in the wind. Life at Dawson Ranch resumed its quiet rhythm with an indifference that felt almost cruel. Rebecca remained where she stood. Now that the confrontation was over, her hands began to shake in earnest. The words Agnes had hurled at her lingered like bruises, rumors, insinuations, the familiar suggestion that her very presence invited shame. She kept her eyes on the ground, afraid that if she looked up, she might see doubt where she needed certainty most. Robert broke the silence first. "You don't have to get back to work right away," he said. His voice was steady, as though he were speaking after a passing storm rather than a reckoning that had cut deep. "Take a moment." Rebecca nodded, though she was not sure what a moment was supposed to look like. Moments had always been dangerous. Moments were when memories crept in. She moved to the porch and sat heavily on the bottom step, pressing her palms against her thighs until the trembling eased. Her chest felt tight, as if she had been holding her breath for years and had only just noticed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said at last, the words slipping free despite her efforts to keep them contained. Robert leaned against a post a few paces away, giving her space. "You didn't," he replied. "They brought it with them." "They'll talk," Rebecca said quietly. "The town always does." "I know." He did not try to soften the truth. "They talked before you ever came here, too." That made her look up. Robert's expression was not defensive. If anything, it was tired. "I don't run my life by what they say." He continued. "If I did, I wouldn't still be standing on this land." Rebecca considered that in silence. For her, words had always shaped reality. They had decided where she could stand and how long she could stay. "They said I belonged to them," she murmured. "That I owed them." Robert's jaw tightened, just slightly. No one belongs to anyone like that. Something in her chest loosened at the simplicity of it. "I wanted to say no before," she admitted. Many times. I just never could." "You said it today," Robert replied. She nodded slowly. "I did." They sat without speaking for a while, the tension draining away in uneven waves. Rebecca felt the deeper exhaustion settle in, not the kind that followed hard labor, but the kind that came after fear had finally loosened its grip. At last, Robert straightened. "I'm going to finish mending the south fence," he said. "You can rest the rest of the afternoon if you want. Or not. Your choice. Her choice." Rebecca watched him turn away, then looked down at her hands, rough, scarred, familiar, hands that had been judged and dismissed, hands that had also built something solid out of neglect. She stood, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to feel the ground beneath her feet again. She filled a bucket at the pump, the cold water splashing against her skin, and carried it toward the barn. When Robert glanced her way, a question in his eyes, she answered before he could speak. "I'm, all right," she said. Just wanted to keep going." He nodded once and returned to his work. The sun was dipping low when the fence was finally set. The land softened into shadow, the day releasing its hold. Rebecca lingered near the edge of the field, watching Robert coil rope and gather tools. The question rose in her chest before she could stop it. Robert," she said. He paused, looking at her. "Well, why are you so good to me?" The words came slowly, carefully. You didn't have to be." Robert did not answer right away. He set the tools down and leaned against the fence, his gaze drifting across the fields as if he were looking at something far beyond them. "My father," he said at last, "was a good man." Rebecca stayed silent. He believed work mattered. Robert went on. "Not because it made you important, but because it kept you honest. He used to say that if a person was willing to work, really work, then they deserved to eat, deserved a place at the table." He swallowed. "When my mother died, everything changed. He drank, more every year, The work stopped meaning what it used to. The anger came easier. So did disappointment. Rebecca listened, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I learned the work, Robert continued. But I learned the temper too. The impatience. I know it's there. He exhaled slowly. I don't want to become what he turned into. But I won't let go of what he taught me. He looked at her then, really looked. You work, he said simply. You don't complain. You don't expect to be carried. That matters to me. Rebecca felt something warm and aching spread through her chest. Not pride, not relief, recognition. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Thank you. Robert inclined his head, as if accepting something already settled. You earned your place here, he said. Same as anyone. As the last light slipped away and the land fell quiet, Rebecca stood beside him, the weight she carried no longer pressing quite so hard. For the first time, she did not feel like she was surviving someone else's mercy. She felt like she was standing on ground she had built herself. Autumn settled over the land without ceremony. Cool mornings replaced the heat, and the fields began to show the quiet marks of care. Fences stood straighter. The barn doors closed without protest. The ranch no longer felt like a place held together by endurance alone, but by intention. Rebecca felt the change most in herself. Her movements grew surer. The constant tension in her chest eased, no longer tightening at every sound or glance. She still spoke carefully. The stutter had not vanished, and she no longer expected it to. When words caught, she waited. No one rushed her, no one mocked her for taking up time. Robert worked beside her now, not in silence born of distance, but in a shared rhythm. He asked her what she thought about the land, about repairs that would hold through winter. The questions unsettled her at first. Then they grounded her. For the first time, her thoughts mattered beyond survival. I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore, she said one evening as they finished stacking wood. Good, Robert replied. It was enough. Rebecca wrote to her parents once. Briefly, she did not apologize. She did not explain herself. She told them she was working and that she was well. When the letter left her hands, it carried no guilt with it. The town continued to whisper, but the words no longer found a place to settle. Rebecca had learned that cruelty only endured when it was allowed. On a cold morning near winter's edge, she stood in the field she had helped reclaim and pressed her boot into the softened soil. It held. For years, she had believed she existed by tolerance alone. Now she understood something quieter and stronger. Worth was not given by beauty or approval. It was built, slowly, through honest work and choice. Rebecca turned back toward the barn and walked forward without lowering her eyes. She was no longer the girl sent away as a joke. She was the woman who stayed,